Another Founder Wisdom podcast, guys, with Leo Benkel. He is founder at Pure Lambda. He's also an advisor, mentor, investor future. So we're going to have a nice convo about all of the above. Leo, welcome to the pod. Can you introduce
Hey,
yourself
Charles.
and tell us a
Yeah, so
bit
my name
more?
is Leo, and I'm the founder of Pure Lambda, and I'm an advisor and a mentor for startup. And before that, I spent 10 years in Silicon Valley, and now I settled in Luxembourg.
All right. So Luxembourg, why? I mean, there's a bunch of companies that are registered there. The taxes are pretty nice. What's up in Luxembourg?
Well, I love Luxembourg because it's the center of Europe. I wrote a pretty decent article on my blog if you want to get deeper into it, but I really love the startup ecosystem there, the dynamism there. Also, there's not that many people living there, so it's a very tight community and
Mhm.
everybody wants to help each other. I have a little story that can be fun to tell. When I created my company, Pure Lambda, here in Luxembourg, the Chamber of Commerce called me. And after living for 10 years in the United States, my first thought was like, oh shit, what did I do wrong? What am I going to have to pay? But no, the Chamber of Commerce just wanted to help me, offer their mentoring services, offer help to settle the business, and they just wanted to help. And I was like, "Well, okay, that's a nice way to start my new life here in Luxembourg."
Interesting. Tell us about your background because you worked at multiple companies. You stayed in the Bay Area for 10 years, mostly as a computer scientist, and then you decided to found your own startups and business. So tell us about your background.
Yeah, so my background is heavily in tech. I've been writing code since I was, I don't know, 6 years old, I guess. And I got a master in computer science in France, where I'm from originally. And I started an internship at the end of my study, and they decided to keep me. And that was the start of my journey in San Francisco. I worked for very small startups. I worked for bigger startups, and I even went through acquisitions, and I've went through process of acquisition. So I've done a bit of everything in Silicon Valley, working always closely with the CTO. Always, I was not one of those engineers that have a sandwich in front of the laptop at lunch. I was always wanted to know more, always talking with the salespeople, talking with the CEO, talking with the CTO. When someone was asking me, "Are you willing to do this and that?" I was always like, "Yes, I'll do it, no matter what." I've hosted a hackathon with the entire company in the middle of COVID, and I was like, "Sure, I'll do it." And I always wanted to learn more, know more. Also, I've always been like in a role of a teacher or mentor, even in the technical role. I'm very passionate about the Scala programming language, and I own 12scala.com, which provides classes for free to anybody that want to learn the language. And I also maintain an online community, the Scala learning community, with more than, I don't know, 300 or 500 people learning the language. And so that was for me very natural to switch to mentoring startups and advising CTOs from coming to San Francisco with a background in tech. My goal was really to bring all the expertise that I acquired and be able to help all the startups succeed.
Interesting. And why did you decided to start your own business?
I was kind of like tired of being, working for someone else's success. And I get bored easily, So I was a bit tired to do several years in the same company, working the same little bit of code. And now with my company, I can mentor and advise like dozens of startups every month in different topics, from India to Argentina to back in California to Canada to everywhere in Europe. And every time it's different challenges, different people to talk to. So it's very much more entertaining. And also, I've been feeling worried about current companies wanting to bring people back in the office, trying to keep the old way alive. So I want to be part of this engine of change, with Web3, with working remote, I want to be part of building the new world, and I don't want to be stuck in an office doing 9 to 5. I think I was out of this life. I've given enough.
Yeah, for sure. And you probably got nice amount of cash in the bank working in Silicon Valley at a nice salary. You invested part of that in some startups. What was the model behind that? Why not like invest it in your own business? Did you want it to, make 10 bets and maybe have a unicorn that would pop out in 10 years? What was the thinking behind that one?
So first of all, my company Pure Lambda is not like a real startup. Like it's basically just me with like a brand around it. I'm not intending of increasing the employee numbers besides me. And the only reason to have this legal entity is to be able to work remotely anywhere in the world, because technically it will be a company to company contract and I'm an employee of Pure Lambda, and that's it. It's super easy to work anywhere in the world, and that's like the steps to be like a citizen of the world, And so my goal in investing is really to diversify my portfolio. I love investing in large portfolios. Like I work with investment fund, which allow me to invest in their portfolio and diversify a lot. I also love companies that does good for the world. So when I see one of those, I always try to work with them or for them at the beginning, either as a mentor and advisor. It's kind of like my due diligence trick. Like if you work for them or with them, you know how they work. You know if that can work, and sometimes you see from the inside that it might not work, and you still try to help them, but maybe they're not ready to invest yet, and maybe they will in the future as they follow your advice, as they follow your mentoring. They're gonna grow and become something that's more interesting to invest in for my personal taste. And most of the company I invested in, there were company I work with that I feel like were very promising. And after my mentoring stopped, because they learned everything I could teach them and they were on good track, I was like, well, you know what? I'm gonna invest now.
What about mentoring? You've done that quite a while at various accelerators, quote unquote. One of them closed down not so long ago. Not sure if you followed like the crash and burn of that company, new chip. Like
Oh yeah.
yeah, that was quite interesting. Do you know what happened there?
Not really. It's very interesting, when you're a mentor in those accelerator, you have very little visibility. Like
Mm,
even I'm a mentor at Founder Institute, 500 startup. You rarely talk to the leadership team. They only, send you an email. It's like, here's the company need help, go help them, and
yeah.
and that's it. So there is no insider information here.
Yeah. I have the same opinion. That's why like I wanted to start my own incubator. The model
Yeah,
being that there's a bunch of folks out there that are willing to give their time for free. Um, Maybe I could charge a monthly fee to these startups, or whatever that is if they get funding. Although I'm not that much of a believer in funding, so not sure if I would go bootstrap. But the point is, I also felt they were super disorganized.
yeah. It's
And
kind of hard to manage communities. I recommend reading the books from Seth Godin when it comes to managing communities. Really, like the Bible for it. He's a
okay,
genius.
huh,
And you see a lot of those accelerators or incubators, sometimes they get a bit overwhelmed. Like when there is these steep curves where nobody know about you and you don't find anybody, either on either side, startup or mentors. And then
mm,
there's all of a sudden everybody knows you, and then everybody wants to work with you, and you need to be able to scale and manage this community. And it's very hard, even for startups that has multi-market platforms, something like Uber, for instance, where they have drivers and user, or anything else that has this type of structure where you have user and service provider. It's really hard to get to critical mass. But once you're there, it's also another challenge to kind of scale and being able to make everybody feel like they're part of it.
right. And mentorship slash coaching is always challenging as well.
Yeah.
Ideally, we'd like to measure the impact of our coaching interventions, and prove that, okay, since that conversation, since that last piece of insight was given, what results happen. Also, if you plug them with another connection of yours, which is another,
Yeah.
it's probably the second most value added of being a mentor or a VC, and other than money, right? Like that would need to be measured as well. Then
Yeah, it's
did you
kind of
get?
hard to measure
Yeah.
because sometimes it even takes time. You might tell something to a founder, like, you need to do this and that. And they'll be like, yeah, 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 yeah. And then you have more conversation. And then all of a sudden they understand why you said that, maybe a few months ago. And all of a sudden it clicks and they're like, ah, yeah, okay. And now, it starts working. So sometimes it can be delayed by months that what you recommended finally click and hit the founder in the right way. And sometimes you say the same thing different way, and then it finally click. And also keep in mind, as a mentor and advisor, you're never the only one. Like the founders as a network of connections, and they receive multiple advice in multiple directions, sometimes opposing opinion. Maybe one mentor would tell them, yes, yes, do it. And the other one would be like, no, it's a bad idea. And at the end, it's the founder taking, the recommendations they prefer with their own feelings, their own knowledge.
Yeah.
And it can be really hard for an individual mentor to be like, oh, this one was from me. It's hard, it's impossible to tell.
Yeah. Sometimes having one main mentor can help with that, because yeah, it can be confusing if you've got conflicting advice coming left and
Yeah.
right as a founder. The general advice also on that, even if you have multiple advisors, is always filter their advice through your own filter, because
Exactly.
you know your reality and your startup's reality, and from there experiment, deploy the
Yeah.
experiment and see. I mean, if it's a really shitty idea, you can say no and it can like be blocked through the filter. But most of the time advisors have good ideas, so you just test all of them and evaluate the result
Yeah.
like a scientist.
And
Talking,
I
yeah,
always remind the founders that this is my own opinion from my own experience, but you're in the driving seat of your startup. You
right,
you have to make the final choice, because sometimes they feel overwhelmed. Some founders can be very impressionable, and they're like, but everybody tell me different thing. I don't know what to do. So I have to remind them, it's like, oh, wait a minute, like everything people tell you, it's not an order. It's like suggestions, and you can filter, ignore them, do your own thing, but keep them in mind if it's useful when the moment comes. Because sometimes you receive advice, it's not useful now, it will be useful later.
right. It's kind of hard, yet as a founder, especially when you're that naive and you're that young and you don't have these education filters and you
Yeah.
believe pretty much everything that you see. Or on the other way around, well, these are pretty rare, but skeptic type of founders, yeah,
Yeah.
CTO type, which are really introverted and don't believe anything they're being told.
Yeah, I've worked with both sides. I worked with the University of Luxembourg, where you have young students. They feel like everything you say is gold, even though I can make mistake. Everybody can make mistake. So you always have to filter it and take it within the context of everything. Or you might not have all the information as an advisor because you only see one slice of the business.
Right.
So you have to remind them, it's like, okay, is this your business? It's your decision. And I've also met the other side where it's like, often older people that had their life experience and they believe everything they do has always been right. It's always been this way they've been doing it. And when it doesn't work and you tell them why, they're like, no, that's not possible. I've always done it that way. That's how I'm going to do it.
Right. I think I prefer the former, right? Because the latter don't
Yeah.
have zero shot at the goal, because if they're 40 or 50 and still need advisors, that's because they haven't been successful yet and they still don't listen to advice. It's game over since day one.
Yeah.
And
I don't
sadly,
think that's true, that because you're old, you don't need advice. For instance, I've met amazing founders that are maybe in their 50s. They had a first career in a very specific topic. Maybe they were, I don't know, business or marketing in a corporation. And now that they're older in their careers, they want to do their own thing, but they don't know anything
yeah,
about tech, for instance. And that's when I come in and I can help them. And some of them are being very responsive. They're like, oh yeah, I don't know anything about this. Can you help me with this? And they have their area of expertise and they really know their limitation, which is some of the best founders to work with. When they know where they're good, they know where they're not good, and they reach out to help they need for those areas.
yeah, sure. I'm just referring, for example, being in an accelerator at like 50, and if you're close-minded, I mean, if you're gonna be
Yeah.
in an accelerator at 50, be open-minded. It's fine if you haven't made it up to that point of your life, but be open-minded, vs what I was referring to. If you're Elon Musk, well, at this point you only take advice for a couple of human beings, like maybe Larry and Sergey, and Elon is so weird that, yeah, like he mostly creates his own data and he's mostly alone in his own pond. Talking about that, I want to talk about space with you because it's one of
Yeah.
your passion. Why space? And also tell us the whole futurist tag. Why do you define yourself as a futurist? What are your interests there?
Yeah, so I think it was like in the middle of COVID. I was bored, and so I went on Coursera, and I've done like a million certificates. If you go on my LinkedIn, I don't know, there's like 30 or 40 certificates. And one of them really caught my eye. It was futurist from the Institute of the Future of Palo Alto. And being in San Francisco, Palo Alto is just down the road. So it was very interesting to do it. I could even meet the teachers in person and everything. So I went through it, and it was really like I wouldn't exaggerate and say life-changing, but almost, because it teaches you a way to recognize signals from the future, they call it. For instance, if you look at the newspaper and they tell you they're starting research in this direction, being a futurist allow you to extrapolate this little grain of sand and be like, okay, what will be the future if this idea propagate to the entire culture, humanity? You know, it's like, what will happen to the world? Will it be positive? Will it be negative? And by seeing all the signals and being able to project yourself 20 years, 30 years in the future, what will happen if this one single idea becomes so popular that it's everywhere? What will the world be? You can also see trends, and you can also see, you can specifically choose startups or ideas to promote that will enable futures that you enjoy. You know, it's like, I see this idea, I imagine a future, if that becomes popular, that would be very, very good for me and for the world. And then I'm like, maybe I can invest in this idea because that will reinforce this trend.
Right.
Be able to project yourself and imagine what it will be like.
Yeah, your connection is red, but what are your space predictions? And can you follow up also with other predictions that you've seen the data that would potentially show that this idea could spread massively over the course of a couple
So
of
it's
years?
never about prediction. It's more like, I've seen this, what will happen if that were become popular, but you can't tell if that will be popular. It's just like, what will happen if, you know? And one of the things I've seen in the space industry recently is like cleaning the debris that's going everywhere. There's also manufacturing in space. Imagine 3D printing in space. You can 3D print ships or satellites directly in space. Imagine you have factories up there, autonomous factories or managed factories. So I think that will be a stepping stone towards, you know, having permanent base in other places, because if you can launch from space, it's obviously a lot cheaper than if you launch from the ground. There is obviously the tourist industry. You've seen more and more of it. I think they even had like a film crew on the ISS. But yeah, I mean, the tourist industry is nice. I mean, it's always nice, but I'm more passionate about technological advancement. I would love if we were to start building a Dyson swarm. I feel like we all have the technology available today. It would just take a lot of money and a lot of time, but that's really nice if someone start doing it.
The Dyson what?
Swarm. It's like, you
What
know,
is this?
building a network of small satellites around the sun to harvest its energy. And I feel like it's almost like around the corner, because, you know, once you have a fuse and it becomes exponential, you use the energy you harvest to create more, and then you duplicate, and it's like snowball. I don't know when that will start, but hopefully at some point.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know about the Dyson swarm slash sphere. So I'm gonna
Yeah, so
study the
Dyson Sphere
concept.
was like what it was theorized or like popularized, but then scientists that took the idea more into consideration. How would we make that real? A Dyson swarm seems a lot easier to manage, because you can start with just one, and then you use the energy from the one to build the second one, and then the two to build four, and
Love it. What are your predictions with AI and AGI singularity? When do you think that's gonna happen?
It's hard to predict. The papers I've seen think that the singularity will happen around 2045, but I mean, we never know. But I've been seeing a lot of progress in AI applied. I don't really like AI because it has so much baggage attached to it, but it's like, you know, advanced machine learning. And machine learning, I feel, is like a very niche area in the world's field of artificial intelligence. And calling it intelligence, I feel, is already a bit too much. I start seeing, you know, people personalize ChatGPT, you know, with giving it names and everything. but it's just an algorithm. It's just math. There's no magic, no intelligence. It's just like, here's predictions about worlds that comes after the first. So I feel like zoos are progressing very fast, and I love it. And what I love the most is seeing zoos apply to science. For instance, when you see what is called AlphaFold with the protein folding, that's a huge leap, because we've been working on it for 15 years, biologists, to try to find the 3D structure of proteins. And here in the last years, we got pretty much all of them already done, like in an instant. So that's very promising. They've also had a fun experiment. I've seen a team using image recognition and a machine learning algorithm to look at an item folding, and just look at it and predict the physics and the math behind it without any prior knowledge. So it doesn't start from what we know, it just guess. And the physics formula it came up with are completely different from what we have. So it's like a completely new physics.
Right.
There's also other ones. I think I've seen ones that was plugged into the structure of the protons. And we think that it's like 3/4, but we theorize that it could have other structures that will fit all we know. And the AI was able, the machine learning was able to filter through hundreds and hundreds of different models. And it found one that works with all the math, but looks completely different from what we think is the reality of today. Like, the model of today is completely different from what the machine learning algorithm identified as a good match.
Yeah, it's
So
so
I think
weird.
that will open more and more doors. I think they also used it for propulsion engine, for like rocket ship, to design like a one from a machine learning 3D designer, and the result looks so weird and alien. I love it.
Yeah, interesting times for sure. Thank you so much for showing up today, Leo. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so there is my website, purelambda.com, and there is also my LinkedIn. It's Leo Benkel, and I think that's the best place to find me. I don't have any other social media, so LinkedIn and my website is the best.